one comedian, one microphone, one merciless line, and suddenly the protection bubble around Meghan Markle and Prince Harry shattered on live television. For years, the industry handled them with silk gloves, gentle teasing, soft satire, harmless late-night nudges that never crossed the invisible royal line. Nobody wanted the backlash, nobody wanted the headlines, nobody wanted to be the villain who attacked the ex-royals. And then Chris Rock stepped onto that Netflix stage and detonated the silence he didn't whisper. He didn't hedge. He didn't wrap it in politeness. He said what half the world had been muttering under their breath. And in that moment, something irreversible happened. The spell broke.
Going on, Oprah, I didn't know. I had no idea how racist they were. It's the royal family. You didn't Google these motherfuckers?
Didn't Google them? The most famous family on earth. 1,000 years of history. Crowns, wars, scandals, coronations. And she didn't once type their name into a search bar? That was the claim. That was the fairy tale. And Chris wasn't buying it. Nobody with Wi-Fi was buying it. The room laughed, but it wasn't just laughter, it was release. The kind of laughter that comes from finally saying something that felt forbidden. Then came the analogy. Clean, surgical, devastating. It moved through the internet like wildfire because it was so brutally simple, the Budweiser line. Legendary, short, unarguable. But the real explosion came seconds later. The accusation that had dominated global headlines. The alleged question about how brown the baby would be. It had been framed as proof of a rotten institution, as the unforgivable sin, as the moral collapse of monarchy itself. And Chris dismantled it in 10 seconds flat. Even black people want to know how brown the baby going to be. The air left the room. And suddenly the narrative wasn't sacred anymore. That was the turning point. Once one major comic dared to question the storyline without the sky falling, the rest of them lined up like sharks catching blood in the water. Colin Jost didn't bother easing into it. A trade deal joke that ended with Britain basically saying, just keep them. 2 nations, 0 claimants. The punchline wasn't subtle, it didn't need to be. Then came the Elon comparison. Electric cars, Mars missions, Twitter. Why would a prince give up everything for an actress from Suits? Not an Oscar winner, not a blockbuster queen, a supporting character from a cable legal drama most Americans hadn't heard of until the palace romance began. And then Snill twisted the knife, a fictional spinoff. Meghan balancing law and life while caring for an unemployed immigrant. That wasn't just a joke, that was cultural whiplash. Grandson of Queen Elizabeth II reduced to a primetime gag about immigration paperwork. And nobody gasped, nobody protested. That's how you know the tide had shifted. Then the lifestyle show, the pretzels, the infamous pretzels. Store-bought snacks poured from one bag into another bag, labeled with a marker, presented as domestic enlightenment. A duchess who once lived inside palace walls now teaching the masses how to transfer carbs between containers. Jimmy Fallon couldn't resist. Scientists searching for alien life while America wonders why Meghan Markle makes her own pretzel bags. Repackaging snacks became metaphor. The critics saw symbolism everywhere. Repackaging narratives, rebranding privilege, selling simplicity wrapped in Montecito gloss. And then the breadwinner joke landed. When you marry a prince and you're the one moving product. Harry, once 6th in line to the throne, now jokingly imagined as warehouse manager for Wildflower Honey and Artisanal Jam. The memoir only poured gasoline on it. Fastest selling nonfiction book. 600 pages. Trauma, frostbite confessions, deep family wounds, details that late night writers treated like comedy gold. Jimmy Kimmel's parody title, childish, brutal, unforgettable, proved something important. Once oversharing becomes spectacle, satire writes itself. And then the nicknames. M&H presented like a luxury brand rollout. Stephen Colbert barely had to try. The idea that their pet names were some grand romantic mystery felt rehearsed, curated, packaged. Golden Globes, Hollywood royalty. Joe Coy's line sliced clean, millions for doing absolutely nothing. And the sting? It landed in a room full of people who grind for every deal. But America was only half the storm. Britain took it personally. They remembered the boy walking behind Princess Diana's coffin. They remembered forgiving the Vegas photos, the Nazi costume, the missteps. They saw redemption arcs, growth, maturity. And then they watched interviews that tore into the institution his grandmother spent 70 years protecting. So when British comedians stepped in, it wasn't playful. It was surgical. Jimmy Carr's line about lifelong feminism demonstrated by marrying a prince and giving up her job, that wasn't subtle. The taxpayer jokes hit harder, splitting time between spending your money in the UK and spending your money in Canada. That laughter had edge. The Kardashian comparison. The Nazi costume resurfacing again and again because it can't be erased from the internet. Every attempt at moral high ground colliding with that frozen image in time. Simon Brodkin watched the entire Netflix documentary. All 6 episodes. The tears, the dramatic pauses, the staged photographs. He admitted something devastating. Before watching, he wasn't a fan. After watching, he hated them. That line echoed because it revealed something deeper. The documentary meant to win sympathy may have heartened critics instead. The fun grenade quote from the memoir, the over-romanticized language, the theatrical phrasing. Brodkin joked he started rooting for Prince Andrew, and that gasp laugh reaction said everything. Then came the curtsy confusion, explaining to an American that she'd need to bow to the Queen, presented as cultural trauma. Critics saw something else, basic etiquette for marrying into the world's most famous monarchy. And then Kelly Osbourne detonated her own bomb, no filter, calling Harry out for whining, for fumbling every opportunity, for complaining from unimaginable privilege. Sharon Osbourne went deeper, family fractures, estrangement, the warning about children growing up without cousins, the ominous prediction it's going to end very, very badly. That wasn't a punchline, that was foreboding. Bill Maher didn't joke, he diagnosed. You can't want privacy and then sell books about wanting privacy. You can't hate attention while touring to discuss how much you hate attention. The contradiction was the comedy. And then South Park delivered the cultural verdict, worldwide privacy tour. Private jets, megaphones, shouting for privacy while chasing headlines. Animation so sharp it felt documentary level accurate. By this point, the laughter wasn't isolated. It was global. The Netflix deals, the Spotify fallout, the grifter comment from Bill Simmons echoing across media, the jam, the honey, the dog biscuits, Conan and Ryan Reynolds joking about tiny jars harvested from Montecito air. Every project became material. Every appearance became content for someone else's punchline. And here's the brutal irony. They left an institution to escape being managed, only to become material for an industry that devours narratives for sport. Different comedians, different styles, same conclusion. You cannot demand privacy while signing global distribution deals. You cannot preach hardship from a $16 million mansion. You cannot condemn media obsession while fueling it. The laughter is not jealousy, it's disbelief. Because at some point, the story stopped aligning with reality. And when belief collapses, satire rushes in to fill the gap. And here's the part nobody in their circle seems willing to say out loud. Once you become the punchline, you don't get to decide when the joke ends. The Spotify deal collapsing wasn't just a business hiccup, it was public humiliation. A massive contract, huge numbers, big promises, and then almost nothing. Minimal episodes, delays, silence. Until finally, a Spotify executive went on his own platform and labeled them grifters. Not whispered, not leaked, said openly. That wasn't satire, that was industry frustration boiling over. The Archetypes podcast was supposed to redefine conversations. Instead, it redefined under delivery. Announced with fireworks, produced with hype, faded with a shrug. And the cancellation wasn't quiet, it echoed. Because when corporate America starts losing patience, the protection layer thins. Then Netflix. The documentary pulled views, yes, but curiosity views, hate watch views, rubbernecking views, the kind you get when people want to see if the contradictions are as dramatic as advertised. After that, the cooking show jokes, the Polo documentary that nobody had requested, announcements of projects that appeared in headlines and then disappeared into fog. Streaming platforms don't survive on symbolism, they survive on deliverables. And suddenly the whispers started, Netflix wants output, substance, content people can name without Googling it. Then came American Riviera Orchard, the jam rollout, the artisanal honey, the dog biscuits, carefully photographed jars with handwritten labels, sold as curated lifestyle luxury. But critics saw something else. Farmers market goods with a Duchess markup. Conan O'Brien and Ryan Reynolds turned it into a running gag. Middleman for jars of jam, harvestable jams, oils of Montecito. The laughter wasn't malicious, it was incredulous. The jam became shorthand for celebrity vanity, for curated authenticity, for privilege trying to cosplay simplicity. And the thing about comedy, it accelerates. Once the audience senses contradiction, every new move feeds the machine. South Park didn't just mock them once, it crystallized the image. Private jets, megaphones, we want privacy. The cartoon version stuck because it simplified the entire saga into one visual contradiction. Family Guy reduced it to one line, "You're millions from Netflix for no one knows what." Put it with the rest of them. Spitting Image went further. Puppets portraying entitlement. California fantasies of normalcy while remaining conveniently close to Oprah. Far from paparazzi, but not too far. Never too far. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Some of that content mysteriously vanished. Quietly. No grand announcement. Just gone. But erasing satire doesn't erase perception. If anything, it intensifies it. Because once people suspect something is being scrubbed, they hunt for it harder. Meanwhile, the royal family remained silent. King Charles III. Prince William. The institution carried on with coronations, ceremonies, public duties, no tell-all tours, no counter-documentaries, just protocol. And silence is powerful. Bill Maher's commentary hit the philosophical core. You can't want it both ways. You can't despise attention and monetize it simultaneously. That's the contradiction critics latch onto. The Montecito Mansion. Private jets to climate conferences. Public speeches about carbon footprints, luxury neighbors, elite award ceremonies, and then interviews framed around hardship. For many viewers, it wasn't cruelty driving skepticism, it was math, the arithmetic of privilege versus grievance. Sharon Osbourne's warning lingers heavier than the jokes. Isolation from family, children growing up disconnected from cousins, fame cycles that burn hot and then burn out. It's going to end very, very badly. Not said with venom, said with recognition of pattern. Hollywood is full of cautionary tales. Couples who turned conflict into currency until the currency dried up, because that's the other layer here. Drama became product. Interviews became episodes. Episodes became contracts. Contracts became expectations. When your livelihood is built on telling your truth about family conflict, what happens when the conflict cools? What replaces it? That question hangs over everything. The public watched the Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the book excerpts, the awards shows, the constant cycle of explanation, and eventually something subtle shifted. Not outrage, not hatred, fatigue. Fatigue turns into satire. Satire turns into reputation. And here's the most brutal part. There is no PR reset button for contradiction. You can rebrand. You can pivot. You can launch jam lines and polo documentaries and philanthropic initiatives. But if actions keep clashing with messaging, comedians will always have material. This isn't tall poppy syndrome. It isn't blind monarchy worship. It's disbelief. Because dignity rarely demands applause. And privacy rarely announces itself through press releases. The laughter from Chris Rock, from Jimmy Fallon, from Kelly Osbourne, from South Park, from British comics who once adored their prince, that laughter isn't random. It's cumulative. Each joke builds on the last, each contradiction compounds. And the irony remains staggering. They left the monarchy to control their narrative, to be free of institutional framing, to be autonomous. Instead, they became recurring characters in the global comedy circuit. Not villains, not heroes. Symbols of modern celebrity paradox, of curated victimhood colliding with visible privilege, of media dependence disguised as media resentment. And maybe the hardest truth in all of it, once the public stops believing the emotional arc, no amount of interviews restores it. Once disbelief sets in, satire cements it. The jokes will continue, not because comedians are cruel, but because contradiction is comedy's oxygen. And until the message and the lifestyle align, until privacy looks like actual privacy, until grievances stop generating content, the megaphones and cartoons will keep shouting. Because in the end, it isn't about crowns or titles or jam jars, it's about coherence. And right now, the world sees chaos where there was supposed to be clarity. That's why the punchlines sting. That's why the laughter echoes. And that's why this story, despite the cancellations, despite the vanished clips, despite the polished branding, feels far from over. Feels far from over. Feels far from over. Feels far.